Joining us now is Simon Rosenberg, Democratic strategist and author of the Hopium Chronicles on Substack. Simon, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Sure.
You know, whenever I'm sitting through those long nights of election coverage, I'm always wondering, what's Simon thinking? And unfortunately, you weren't there to tell us, so I needed to get you here to start things off tonight. I want to begin with what we just heard. I have never run that long a comment of endorsement by a union official of a candidate on this program before. I've also never heard one that's as strong and clear and draws as sharp an issues contrast. Exactly what the stakes are for voters who are in positions like the United Auto Workers.
Yeah, listen, I mean, this goes back to, Lawrence, the basic fundamental reality about this election that we've been talking about over the last few weeks, which is that Joe Biden is a good president. The country is far better off today. The Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country. And they're running the most unfit guy who's ever run for president in the history of the country. And, you know, this contrast between this modern and successful and, party, the Democratic Party, and the unbelievable historic mess that we're seeing on the Republican side is really what we've seen in the last few weeks. Remember, one of the things that happened in 2022 was these Trumpy candidates that ran in the battlegrounds struggled to bring their coalition together, and they lost their elections. To me, the most significant data we've gotten in the last few weeks is we're starting to see clear evidence that Trump is really going to struggle as nominee to bring his party together. To have the data that we saw last week in Iowa, which was repeated in New Hampshire, that a large number of Haley voters are planning to vote for Biden over Trump. We've never seen data like that before, that 40% of Republicans view things that Trump have already done as disqualifiers for him. He's in trouble. He did not have a good last 10 days. And Democrats, as you pointed out, Joe Biden had a very good night in New Hampshire. We should feel very good about where we are. We've got a lot of work to do, but we should feel good about where we are right now.
Simon, have you had 24 hours now? Is that enough time for you to get over your shock that the polls overstated Donald Trump's position with voters in New Hampshire by double of what the margin actually turned out to be?
Listen, I mean, Trump and MAGA are having performance problems, right? We've seen Republicans struggling in election after election since Dobbs happened in 2022. And Trump has come out of the box really struggling. In Iowa, they had very low turnout. I have this stat that 56,000 Republicans voted for Trump in Iowa, and 700,000 Republicans didn't, right? I mean, where is this strong candidate drawing people out to vote for him? And then in New Hampshire, to your point, and you're one of the only commentators that have raised this, Trump dramatically underperformed the polling. I mean, by a really significant margin. So out of the box, this guy is looking like, listen, you and I discussed this last week. He is a different candidate than he was in 2020 and 2016. He's far more degraded, he's far more extreme, he's far more dangerous. He's having his performance on the stump is much more erratic and wild and unhinged. And he's making unbelievably consequential mistakes, like coming out against the ACA, an unforced error. He's a bad candidate. He's a weak candidate. Donald Trump is weak and unfit. He's not strong and powerful. And we've got to help the media come to, I think, a more accurate understanding of the nature of his candidacy. This guy is struggling, and we're going to kick his butt, I think, in the election in 2024.
We are not going to break the media's obsession with polls, but I've been trying to help the viewers' understanding of polls. And so polling over the years has faced a bunch of challenges. The answering machine was the first big challenge, that pollsters would call a home and a machine would answer. It would throw off the system. That took them years to figure out how to deal with the answering machine problem. Then came cell phones. They didn't know how to poll cell phones at all for years and years. Then they finally penetrated the cell phone. I'm just pointing that out to viewers. I know you know all of that, just so they can understand that polling has been changing its techniques and its methods constantly in response to new developments. Trump is a new development, and it seems to me that Trump is this particular challenge for polling. And they're using their methods that end up showing Trump with a 20-point lead in New Hampshire. He gets a 10-point win. Is there something in the polling of Trump that the media has to be very, very careful of?
I just think in general right now, we learned in 2022 that if you center your understanding of American politics around polling, you're taking an extraordinary risk, right? The polls did not actually predict or explain what was going to happen in the election. And I think we have to take all polling now with a grain of salt. I think part of what probably happened last night is that more independent voters probably showed up than many of the pollsters anticipated. That certainly, which could explain why he didn't do as well, because the independent voters tended to vote for Haley, right? That would be an explanation. I don't really know that for sure. But I will tell you that in general, since Dobbs happened, and I really do, I begin to think that Dobbs may have broken the Republican Party in some ways, that even for the 20-30% of Republicans who are not MAGA, it was just a bridge too far. It was too much. They couldn't handle it. And that the Republican Party now has even become deeply unattractive and ugly to Republican voters. And so since Dobbs in 2022, they've continued to struggle. They just aren't winning elections. They're not getting their voters to turn out. They're struggling in these early states. MAGA is a failed politics. As Nikki Haley, by the way, said, MAGA lost in 2018, 2020. And in the last 2 years, we've done an extraordinary thing. The party in power always loses seats in modern American history. We gained ground in 2022. We gained ground in 2023. And that's because the most powerful force in our politics today is fear and opposition to MAGA. It's far more powerful than disappointment in Joe Biden and the Democrats. And the Republicans, instead of running away from this politics, they're doubling down on what has been an absolutely failed politics in recent years. And I think Democrats should be optimistic about what we can do in 2024.
Simon Rosenberg, thank you very much for starting off our discussions tonight.
Thanks, Lawrence.